time comes when silence is betrayal. That time has come for us, even when pressed by the demands of inner truth. Men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war. And I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. What do they think as we test out our latest weapons on them? Now that is little left to build on save bitterness. We are met by deep but understandable mistrust. To speak for them is to explain this lack of confidence in Western words, and especially their distrust of American intentions now. The world now demands a maturity of America that we may not be able to achieve. This way of settling differences is not just. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Somehow this madness must cease. We must stop now. I speak as one who loves America, to the leaders of our own nation. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must be ours.
Oh, the beauty of Charlie Hebdo's freedom of expression. But freedom of expression, targeting Muslims and Christians? What about the special ones? Ever heard of the expression, what is good for the goose, is good for the gander? No? Don't worry, here come the ganders. Now, let's give a dose of their own medicine.
Now the Jews would have us believe that there's something sacred about the Western Wall, that it's a remnant of the Second Temple, where paper prayers of the Goyim are snatched by the divine presence, who supposedly dwells within its crevices and stones. Dead wrong. The Wailing Wall is actually the remains of a Roman fortress named Fort Antonia, built north of the actual temple site, where no protruding rock ever existed, but rather was built upon the Gihon Spring. There's nothing sacred about this wall. This is attested to by the eyewitness Jewish historian Josephus, who also wrote in his Jewish Wars that the Romans left nothing above or below ground of the Second Temple, so that one coming to Jerusalem thereafter would never believe a temple ever existed. According to Josephus, Titus, the Roman general who razed Jerusalem to the ground in 70 AD, allowed Fort Antonia to remain to house the 10th Legion, left to monitor Roman affairs in Jerusalem. And thus the prophecy of Christ, not one stone will be left upon another, was fulfilled. God will not be mocked.
Except by Charlie Hebdo. Some think that Luz laughed at sheeple's stupidity. They didn't get the hoax turned into a Gladiator false flag. Here is the hoax revealed by Carla Brunson. The policeman used a crude special effects device that failed. This is why they have taken out or blurred this scene from the video.
If you still don't believe me, then get the book, The Temples That Jerusalem Forgot, by Professor Dr. Ernest Martin, and you'll surely be convinced. The Wailing Wall is the seat of a satanic ritual outlined by the 13th century Jewish occult system known as the Kabbalah, as expounded in the Zohar and expanded upon by the 18th century Hasidic movement. You see, this so-called divine presence at the Wailing Wall is actually the Kabbalistic feminine emanation of their false god, the Shekinah. Watch closely how the rabbis thrust their pelvises and penises back and forth in a prescribed prayer movement called davening, in which the Jew copulates with the Shekinah in order to give birth to an erotic union with the Ein Sof, the Kabbalistic masculine emanation of their false god. For so many other saps like McCain, Bush, Obama, Clinton, and Romney, to perform the rite of political passage at the Wailing Wall is nothing less than to shake hands with the devil. And if God doesn't dwell in temples made by human hands, as the Bible tells us, much less would he dwell in a Roman fortress. The hoax is on. Not only are our politicians selling their souls to the Jews at a Roman fortress named Fort Antonia, misnamed the Western Wall, they're participating in a lewd occult ritual where the so-called divine presence is actually Satan himself. Satan's seat is at the Wailing Wall, and our politicians, brought there by the Jews, are carrying him all the way back home to America.
Anti-Semitic, you say?
Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which it's okay. They are talented people, and they have power, money, and media, and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism, and it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics, and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people, and that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
The Jerusalem Post. Yosef. Gentiles exist only to serve Jews. Here we have a picture of Yosef with Shimon Peres and Benjamin Netanyahu. Here we can see two articles from the Jerusalem Post that show that the high priest had a large following, as nearly 1 million people attended his funeral. Now, let us see how it feels to have our dearest idol mocked. Obadiah Joseph. The only purpose of non-Jews is to serve Jews.
Rabbinic Judaism began as the work of a small, ambitious, and homogeneous group of pseudo-priests. By the 3rd century AD, the rabbis expressed their self-conception in the ideology of oral Torah, which held that a comprehensive body of teachings and practices, halakha, not included in Scripture, had been given by God, and through Moses, only to the rabbinic establishment. End quote from Rabbinic Judaism by Jacob Neusner, with a contribution by William Scott Green, pages 31 through 34. Green gives the origin of Judaism as 70 AD. Quote, "It helps to remember that Rabbinic Judaism's initial catalyst was neither the canonization of the Hebrew Bible nor readerly research of Scripture, but the demise of the Second Temple. Rabbinic Judaism, page 33. The Talmud, then, beginning with the Mishnah, is the chief scripture of the religion of Judaism. The great Pharisaic sages of blessed memory decree this themselves in the Talmud. From the Talmud, Y. Shabbat 16.1, 15c, B. Baba Messiah 33a, comes the three propositions of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, one of the most revered of Talmudic sages, whose supposed burial site in the Israeli state is the scene of a huge mass annual pilgrimage. Talmud master Yochai writes, quote, A. He who occupies himself with Scripture gains merit that is no merit. B. He who occupies himself with Mishnah gains merit for which people receive a reward. C. He who occupies himself with Talmud, there is no source of merit greater than this. End quote from Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Like the saying, what part of no don't you understand? What part of the preceding unimpeachable statement from the supreme holy book of Judaism do Gentiles and Christians not understand? Old Testament study, referred to as Scripture, is utterly denigrated unless it is viewed through the distorting prism of Talmud. This is what Jesus Christ stated in Mark 7 about the oral tradition that became the Talmud when it was written down, that it makes the Bible of none effect. Judaism is the religion of the tradition of the elders and the nullification of the Old Testament, exactly as Jesus Christ stated. Yet his bold words of truth are so politically incorrect in our Jewish age that for fear of the Jews, every somersault must be turned by those who claim to be his followers today in order to nullify Christ's own words of warning against the nullification, and in order to conform to the iron dogma that the adherents of Judaism are the people of the book. Indeed they are, but that book is not the Old Testament Scriptures, but rather the Babylonian Talmud. Now the reader may ask, what of the Torah scrolls carried through the synagogues with such extreme reverence? Well, what of it? Every idolater reverences his totem pole, but the worship of a dead thing does not give it life. The mutilated Sefer Torah scrolls carried in the pagan synagogue rites contain no vowels. The scrolls are composed entirely in consonants. These scrolls, then, are almost unreadable and virtually meaningless. They are reverenced by these Jewish pagans as holy relics of false gods in a substitution game. Yahweh destroyed the temple and took away the Holy of Holies, which was rent at Christ's crucifixion. They had nowhere biblically authentic place to turn except toward Jesus Christ, but they refused him. And in their perversity, they invented the religion of Judaism and established the idolatry of the scrolls as a substitute for the temple and the Holy of Holies.
Isn't it time to wake up?
And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on. The fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant of the big red, white, and blue dick that's being jammed up their assholes every day. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
The New World Order has arrived and the sheeple still don't have a clue. The puppet masters constantly redirect the attention of the sheeple so that they keep ignorant of what really matters. We are at the brink of World War III and all we see is discussion of topics that are not central to our great situation. Better check Snortster's latest video with title, "Why Are You Telling Me?"